Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ranting Atheist podcast. Today on Story of an Atheist, I'd like to share a recording of the conversation I had with a Nigerian atheist, or rather a Nigerian American atheist. You know, she was born here, but she has spotted a long time ago. She's a very happy person, a very delightful person, and I really enjoyed this conversation with her. I can call her my atheist auntie. She's also the first guest who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community. She gives us an insight of what it was like back in the days, because I call her my auntie, so she understands that she didn't go through this our internet deconversion process. She went through the manual process, and god damn it, I should take down now. Wow. So please subscribe Apple, Spotify, Google, and without any delay, let's go and listen to the recording of our conversation we had some months ago. Hello, Dr. Uju, and you are welcome to Story of an Atheist.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and to have this conversation with you, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you accepting my invite.
I think the topic is so important, and I think it's critical that our voices be out there, and the representation and just the understanding of the normalcy of our experiences just, be out there.
Yeah. So, this podcast was created for what was in my mind, just for Nigerians to know that, okay, yes, there are atheists in Nigeria. But, in Nigeria, we hear your voice now and be like, now it will be this one now. But they are looking, but when you look at it, you know that, this is Nigeria.
Obviously. Somebody whose name is, Uju Anya cannot be anything else but Nigerian. I mean, Uju Anya.
Yes.
They can't deny me at all.
At all. We can't do. So we just move to the intro part. So name, location, what you do for a living, and any other thing you want to add.
Okay. So you're calling me Dr. Uju. Uju is my first name, obviously. I'm Dr. Uju Anya.
Yeah.
I am currently located, the city where I live, recently moved to Pittsburgh in the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. I'm here because I'm a college professor. I'm, university faculty.
Wow.
And I work currently at Carnegie Mellon University in the Modern Languages Department. So I'm a linguist by training and by trade. So I do research and I teach at the university level in applied linguistics. And my area of applied linguistics is language learning. So I work on understanding processes and theories of language learning experiences, and I also teach language teachers how to teach languages.
Wow.
So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I'm a teacher's teacher, definitely.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's very good. So to give context to our listener about your age, I usually ask people. So with you now, are you Gen X, Millennial, or Gen Z? Obviously not.
I'm, I guess, what they call Xennial. So it's sort of the cusp between Gen X and old millennials. Okay. So I was born in 76, and so I think millennials officially start getting counted in 1981 or something, 81, 82. Depends on which source you ask. And then Gen X, we're sort of the latter, or we're in the 70s maybe, but there's some of us who are in the latter part of the 70s that we grew up both like analog and digital. So, and we have experiences that are, very similar to the millennials, but we're still kind of Gen X in terms of,
the age group,
what we saw in the Stone Age, and we had, and our experiences of the 90s, for example, that's like what you knew and did in the 90s is very critical to situate you generationally.
Yeah.
So, officially I'm Gen X, but if you want to count that little, 4 or 5 year window, I'm an Xennial.
Nice. I've not heard that group, Xennial.
So it explains a lot because, we're sort of, we identify with Gen X, but not as deeply. But then we're also not as digital as the millennials, so we're kind of in this weird cusp area. Yeah. But when we do those battles online and, when it's like Gen Z versus, millennial or whatever, I am Gen X. I don't, I firmly, I firmly stake my claim as Gen X because, I want to tell everybody I'm an old woman. I don't mess around with these kids. So,
Gen X versus Gen Z versus millennials, crazy fight, unnecessary fight.
It was ridiculous. I had to speak up. I remember, I was like, what is this nonsense? And I felt like, millennials had no business getting in fights with these children, So I'm just like, can y'all just respect yourself and just realize that, millennials, they turned 40 this year. So I'm just like, come on, stop. And, the Gen Zs are still in diapers. They went to prom on the computer. It's just like, come on. It's like, you, like, at your big age, you're fighting with somebody who had Zoom prom. I mean, let's just stop. It was embarrassing. They were making videos of dancing and whatnot. I'm like, you can't compete with the children in dancing. Like, what's going on? Oh, it was.
The millennials, our range, we are so large. I think that's also part of the 94s, the 93s,
I think
the 96, 7. So they are very close to each other. So that's what
I think
caused the whole ruckus.
So my focus was on like the geriatric millennials. I was talking to them, but I guess, the younger ones are closer to Gen Zs.
Yeah, they don't see that. So what was your religious background like?
Oh, so I guess a little bit of my family history is that, I super like I do because although I was born in Nigeria, I was raised in the U.S. And I came to the U.S. when I was about 10 years old. And I came to the U.S. Because my parents' marriage didn't work out. So my mom was from Trinidad and Tobago. And my dad, of course, was an Igbo man. And they met in when they were going to school in England. And then they got married in England and then moved to Nigeria together. And, my mom spent, a couple decades in Nigeria and the marriage didn't work out. And so she took her 2 youngest kids, myself and my brother, and came to the U.S. So that's, sort of the background. So I have about 10 years of life in Nigeria. Specifically in Enugu. So I was there until 5th grade. So I remember things, I remember food. I remember the village. I remember,
Gari.
Some relatives. I remember Gari. I remember all that stuff, I remember, and I really miss, fruits like udala and icheku and, things that I really used to love.
Yeah.
So when I was in Nigeria, we were Anglican. Because my dad was Anglican and, my mom was a very patriarchal woman. Although she was really independent and fierce, she was still very obey the man type of thing and bow to whatever is, happening with him. Yeah. So although she was raised Catholic and she went to convent schools and, she almost became a nun herself. That was how much of a devout Catholic that she was. She converted to Anglicanism because of my father. So the little bit of time that I remember in Nigeria, we went to Anglican churches. But then the minute we stepped foot in America, she immediately, I think, like baptized us Catholic, put us in Catholic schools. We went through like, confirmation, like the whole thing. So my most, let's say, comprehensive and deepest experience with religion was being raised Catholic by a devoutly Catholic woman. Someone I used to joke was more Catholic than the Pope. She was definitely much more moral than the Pope.
Wow.
But, she just, extremely Catholic.
She's kind of true. She was actually more moral than the Pope.
I mean, obviously, she wasn't the leader of a pedophile ring, to me, it was obvious that she had much more character. She wasn't, protecting, aiding, and abetting child rapists.
Yeah.
So, my mom was a very, very moral, religious, and very devoted to not just God, but godliness and the practice of religion, and specifically Catholicism. Not only did she raise us, Catholic, she made sure we were really active in the Catholic Church, and she made sure we were educated in Catholic schools. So I attended Catholic schools pretty much all my schooling all the way through university. Ooh. So one thing that, I have huge quarrels with, Catholicism, and many Catholics, and definitely Catholic leadership. But one thing that I will never deny them is they were responsible for huge, let's say, foundation of my intellectual education. Okay. So I was educated by Catholics, strong Zavarian tradition Catholics, very, very good schools. Not all of them are great. The Opus Dei ones are awful. I think those are just training camps for, fascists and abusers, more so than normal. But let's say the Zavarians, the ones that were responsible for my education, were phenomenal. The Jesuits have good education as well. So science education, philosophy, literature, you name it. It was just really, really strong in the schools that I attended. And this was because of my mother's dedication to Catholicism and Catholic life, in all aspects of life.
Oh, that is some soaking and dripping in Catholicism.
Oh, definitely. But not just, the Catholic traditions. So my mom was Catholic and raised, the children that she was most responsible for, the youngest one's Catholic. But my older siblings, for example, were Protestants. So they eventually converted, to Pentecostal, exactly, and evangelicism of some sort. So they consider themselves religious fundamentalists, and things like that. So there's just a mix of different strains of Christianity in my family, in that there's really strong Catholicism, but then also really strong Protestant strains, and a broad range of Protestant strains, like, the more sort of traditional ones like the Anglicans, and the more radical ones like the Pentecostals.
And evangelicals.
Exactly. Yeah.
You have so much here in Nigeria, it's sickening.
It's a lot to deal with. And I definitely believe that they are responsible for a lot of the, if not all of the trouble that they purport to try to save people or heal people from. They actively cause it. So it's a huge difficulty that you have to manage in Nigeria.
Yeah. So this is your religious background now. You went to Catholic school, your mother raised you Catholic. How did you start questioning? Was there a questioning phase? How did you start looking outside? How did you get your head above that Catholic water?
I always did question from the very beginning.
Okay.
Because, well, the Catholics made the mistake of giving me a thorough education.
Ooh.
So it wasn't just religious education. I think the Protestants learned how to do the indoctrination part a little bit better in that, they teach you everything. It was about religion.
Yeah.
So, and God controlled everything. The Catholics, at least back when or the people who educated me as Catholics, were still scientists and philosophers, so they still
believe in science.
Exactly. So they would teach us religion, and we definitely had religious education and religious classes, and however, we also had very strong education in other areas. So I would go from one class to another, and shit just didn't make sense. Like, it didn't cross, So I'm like, okay, how can you teach me, physics and biology, teach me that reality is a certain way. And then I go to religious education and then you tell me to believe that, virgins have babies. Like so immediately I was having questions, and I had questions quite young. And it became a problem because in my family, I was always, the questioning one, the rebellious one, the white sheep of the family, if you will. So it was complicated, and I was punished a lot and shut down a lot for the questions because it just wasn't allowed. So that was a problem. So my religious education was pretty much an education in cognitive dissonance. It was an education in holding disparate ideas in your head at the same time. And it was an education in hypocrisy, and it was an education in lies. So I had to learn really quickly the kinds of things that I wasn't allowed to say, even though I believed them in my head, or I was noticing them and stuff. So just, the religious education was contradictory in so many ways, just existing and knowing how the world worked. And it was also especially when I was an adolescent, I started to read feminism. So, and funny enough, I was also educated by feminist nuns, and, which was wild because the United States of America is a wild place. The Catholic nuns are usually like huge feminists. So, which is wild because they're also patriarchal, and they carry a lot of water for patriarchal traditions and stuff like that, and they hide a lot of abuse by patriarchal leaders. But at the same time, they're wildly rebellious as well. And a lot of them are lesbians, and a lot of them entered into the nunnery or, the nun life or religious life because they were running from men. So, they were like, that it was very uncomfortable for them to picture a life with a man. So you might as well sort of like marry Jesus, instead of a real dude who's going to expect you to fuck him or something. And, it was
expect you to fuck.
Not at all. Jesus is dead. You ain't fucking him. You don't have to cook or clean for him. So it's just, there are a lot of, like strong-headed women took refuge in the religious life in Catholicism because, number one, they would be surrounded by other women, and there's a lot of fucking happening in those nunneries in the first place, so it was just, so I was educated by feminist Catholic nuns. So at the same time, they're teaching you about like male leadership and respect for the Pope and blah, blah, blah. And they were also teaching you, about, like female empowerment, so it was just contradictions everywhere. But as I was reading about feminism, both, from Catholic education and also outside, and also when I read about imperialism and, colonization and things like that, all of it just didn't match. And when I read about slavery, and the very deep and intimate hand that the church had, in human enslavement and the enslavement of Africans, and Black people, in addition to Native Americans, etc. These were all things that I was reading about quite young in my life, as a preteen, as an adolescent. I was a latchkey kid, because my mom raised us alone. So she worked a lot. So I was home by myself very often. And I watched a lot of television. I read a lot. And I consumed a lot of media, and news and things like it. A lot of it just didn't work with what religion was telling me, So it was very uncomfortable to be shaped by patriarchy in religion and to bow to patriarchy when you were getting also feminist education.
Yeah.
And then it was also really difficult to accept the rule of morality or, the idea of goodness and godliness from really ungodly assholes, that were just really terrible people. So these are the contradictions that I started to see and be uncomfortable with for a really long time. Obviously, when I was younger, I couldn't really articulate it as well or kind of shape it in my mind. So the older I got, the more education I got. College just blew everything up. By the time I hit university, I'm just like, oh, this is a mess. Like
bullshit.
Total bullshit. I was just like, I can't handle this no more. And it was around university that I became a lot more, let's say, open about my doubts and questions. And also I started to rebel against having to go to church because I went to university away, so I didn't have to wake up and go to church and stuff. I wasn't bound to my mother's house and my mother's rules anymore. So all that stuff. So it became looser and looser as I got older. And I even when I eventually abandoned Catholicism itself, I still didn't abandon God because I was very, very attached to how I was raised. And I was raised and taught that you can only be good with God.
Yeah.
And there was no way that you can have morality or live a moral life or live a good life or be a good person if you didn't believe in God. So even though I eventually abandoned religion, and specifically Catholicism, I still didn't want to let God go.
Yes,
so I experimented, with like other religious beliefs and religious traditions, specifically with Ifa and Yoruba deities. Those were those were so sexy.
Weak ass motherfucking gods. Where were they when the British came to invade Nigeria? Where were they?
They were getting drunk and fucking bitches. That's where they were. That's why I like those gods, because to me they were more like realistic. They had more human tendencies. They were more like understandable. The Yoruba deities or Yoruba religious traditions were matriarchal, in many ways, and they allowed for female leadership and things like that I didn't see in the Abrahamic religions.
Abrahamic is strictly dicks only. Man.
Yeah, exactly.
Dicks only.
What is it? Strictly dickly. That's exactly how they are. So I was just, they were a little softer for me, because not only were they more feminist in my view of things, they were also more relatable and more human and more manageable, So I dabbled in that for a little while, but that was sort of like my final stop. And eventually it couldn't happen anymore. And I eventually really, really let go of not just religion, but God itself. When I got married, and I got married, my ex-husband was an atheist.
Okay.
So, I'm a lesbian, Twitter knows this, and everybody else. And But I've loved women and dated women my entire adult life. So I'm one of those things, the ones they call, what is it? Bi now, gay later. So I was bisexual for a while.
Okay.
Or at least felt that I was, but then I realized after 20 years that I had only touched one man in about 20 years, so it became very clear.
Could that have been a result of the religious upbringing?
Not as much as just my natural desires, It was about who I liked and who turned me on and who was exciting to be around and with whom I felt desire and with whom I felt like I can really exhale, and that did not happen with men as much as it happened with women. It actually happened with just one man. That lucky one that I held on to, because it's so much easier to live in a heterosexual situation than to struggle being gay. And I was very, very thrilled that I could find at least one man that I could do this with.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out after a while, but it's just, I'm not a newcomer to the whole gay thing, it's just that it's easier to not be gay or admit you're gay when you're in a heterosexual situation. So with this man, whom I loved dearly, and I also loved the fact that he was honest and moral, nonviolent, and just a wonderful human being. And there were two big things about him that I wasn't used to, and I had never had any kind of exposure to. The first was he was completely ungodly. He was not only an atheist, but he was raised by atheists and raised in an atheist society. So this, he was from the old Soviet Union. This was a Russian man. So not only was he he himself not godly, his family had no experience with all that.
Yeah.
And nor did he have a society that,
thanks to Stalin,
valued the valued religion in any way. So there was no societal pressure or anything like that to be part of churches although they had Russian Orthodox and whatnot, it wasn't a part of his reality.
Yeah.
So here was somebody who was completely and thoroughly ungodly, but still much more moral than any religious person I had ever met. And it was wild to see that. How? I've been told all my life that, if you weren't
good.
Exactly, you cannot be good without God. And here was living proof of that. So, he wasn't the first atheist or the only atheist I knew. I had gone to school, with atheists. I had professors who were atheists. I didn't have enough of a close relationship with them to really see, so these are people who are sort of in my life, but they didn't influence me.
Yeah.
But just having a one-on-one relationship with someone, watching how they live and also having deep conversations with them and talking about morality and ideas and experiences. It's just that was the final nail on the coffin, if you will. There was no way that I was going to hold on. So that was one thing that he, destroyed in my life was God. And another thing was the notion of violence in the house. I like many Nigerians, I came from a violent house, a house where they beat children, a house where adults beat each other, and mostly men beating women and women beating children and men beating women and children. So it's just
crazy,
very, very typical. So, and not only was my house like that, my relatives' houses were like that. Society normalized that. So exactly, anyone on the street had the right to beat you. As a child,
because they're older than you.
Exactly. So that there was tremendous violence in my life and my upbringing. Things that people won't even call violence, they call spanking or discipline or whatever.
Spare the rod and spoil the child.
Yeah, all that. And here is once again a human being who was well behaved, moral, truthful, generous, loving, caring, and completely nonviolent. At least, not to me, and not to our children. And, and also talking to him, and no one ever hit him either, nor as a child or anything. Like he wasn't raised with people who did that.
Yeah.
And he turned out great. So once again, another thing was destroyed in my mind, that, you needed to use violence to mold and shape and train people.
Yeah.
That was destroyed as well, along with God.
Violence, always violence.
Yeah. And not just like the physical violence and the symbolic violence of it, like the religion is extremely violent. Not only in the stories and the imagery, like in ideas and ideologies that it promotes, it's also violent in the way that it promotes violence, and the use of violence in order to propagate the religion and maintain and, hold it.
Yeah.
And the power in violence and all kinds of things. So it was a very natural thing for me to release both of those from my life in this relationship with this individual, and seeing that it is possible to have a moral, loving, fruitful, successful existence, relationship, etc., with other human beings without God and without violence.
That's really something.
Yeah. And I don't think people who live like that have two heads or whatever. I think we're all capable of this.
At all.
Like, this is, the way that we're told that you need this or else everything will fall apart. That's not true at all. Like, especially the beating children thing, if you don't beat children, they'll be completely
Nigerians
wild and immoral. It's a lie. And it's unrealistic. It's damaging. And I have proof in my own life that, my sibling that got beaten the most is the one that turned out the most psychotic, the one that, was a felon and an abuser, a rapist. I mean, all kinds of horrible things. Wow. He's just a terrible human being. And he was also the one that was disciplined and punished the most, like physically, right? Like, I witnessed it. I heard stories of it and stuff. Not only did he suffer tremendous violence in our house by almost every adult that had that took care of him in any way. He also suffered a lot of violence at boarding school and things like that, like the older kids that would enact horrible, terrible, terrible violence against him and others as well. So this is somebody who was beaten into submission in many, many ways. So by that logic that, you're going to beat someone into being good, he should be the best person in our whole house. Yeah. And he's actually the most rotten. So no, that's not the way.
And this whole beating situation, Africans or Nigerians have that mentality that I'm older than you, so I deserve to be respected. Yeah,
which is not true, because look at all the old men that destroyed our lives in our countries, and it's because the whole thing, you're not allowed to question the elderly, or
an elderly man. Cannot be talking to an elderly man like that.
Exactly. You can't challenge them. Stupid. You can't say it, because it goes against who we are or our traditions, or this is why we suck. This is why, like, our lives are horrible, because we don't have a tradition of rebellion against authority. The mere authority conferred upon people because they just existed longer than somebody else. And it's horrible. Mugabe, for example, how long has he been in control for, running that country deep, deep into the dirt, but people can't even gather him and say, uncle, let go.
He doesn't want to.
You can't, because, well, he's an elder or whatever. So, but this is also part of the whole religious thing as well, right? Because religion fosters this unquestioning obedience, right? And adherence to authority, to male authority, and doing it without any sort of rationale, except for, well, this is the way it is, and this is the way it has to be, or God said so. And
the worst cop out ever.
We have very, very weak traditions in criticism and defiance of orthodoxy and established authority. And this is a huge problem for us. And religion really, really takes advantage of this.
We'll get there. Bit by bit, generation by generation. We'll start unlocking.
I think so.
We'll start unlocking.
I have a lot of hope. That NSARS movement gave me so much hope, because it showed me that this is not a lost cause, for Nigeria.
Is it that? Are you sure?
I think so.
NSARS broke a lot of us. So that's movement, especially. It's even revealed that even in our so-called unity, there's the bigotry still permeates deep, because when FEMCO indicated their support for the LGBT community, and immediately everybody lost focus and came for them. And
it's awful.
And I remember
that.
It's always that idea always come, like today now. Somebody tweeted, I tweeted at someone because I watched that video where she was saying you need to stop forcing homosexuality on people, forcing your beliefs. And I said, this forcing your beliefs rhetoric is just your way of saying, I don't want to accept LGBTQ people as human beings. They are not forcing their beliefs. It's not a religion or a faith. This belief that it is not. They are human beings. They have desires. But your Bible or your Quran tells you to kill them. But because you know that it is not right to kill them, but you refuse to accept them as normal people, that's dehumanizing them.
Yeah, it's awful. And it was really sad to see FEMCO be obliged to disavow, their support for LGBTQ.
It's the power of the mob.
Because of the mob.
The mob.
And also because the mob, not just the mob, there was the legal aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Because the government was really eager to shut them down. And that could be one thing that they could use and shut down the whole thing by saying that FEMCO was promoting illegal activities. By saying they were promoting homosexuality, and homosexuality is against the law. So it was a calculated move that they made to throw LGBTQ under the bus in order to save the broader picture, because people were going to use that, the government were going to use that to bring down the whole movement. So I understood it, and it was sad and heartbreaking. It was so tragic to see. However, I understand why it happened and the calculation that they had to make, in order for the work that they were doing to progress. And even afterwards, the whole witch hunt, literally, they came for them with the whole accountability thing that they had to show papers and whatnot.
Every time.
Every single time, bring papers, bring proof that you didn't steal money. This is accountability that they don't ask the government for, but they're asking FEMCO for.
There's this irritating, they feel like women, the women are the effects they had for even Jack Dorsey to get involved. It really pains a lot of patriarchal people. Who are them? Who are they?
Especially Baba, what is it? Shega? What was his name? Shega Link?
That guy, the original snake.
That guard, the garden gnome.
That guy's a snake.
So he was really, really pained by that, because that upset him so deeply.
Because he felt he was the one that started the NSAS movement.
That was his hustle, a hustle that never really reached any results, because he was actually in cahoots with with SARS and the people that he was. So every once in a while he would do something for one person to liberate, or get somebody out of jail.
And but
as a whole, he had no intentions there were no intention to dismantle the system. He was just, because he was profiting from it. It was just for show, every one little advocacy here and there. But FEMCO went in and actually had systemic effect. And that hurt him bad.
Seriously.
And it provoked a lot of fear in the government and the powerful to see what women could do, and especially young women. Oh, that one was painful to see these young girls.
Yeah, look at these small girls.
Really,
small
you
girls.
know,
What are they doing?
small girls.
Right.
It's just so. But what I'm saying is, you know, NSARS broke a lot of people for sure. However, it also gave me hope. Just FEMCO, just the fact that they existed and they were able to do what they were able to do. And the fact that NSARS was able to exist and mobilize in that way and show the possibility of something.
What women can do. Because what I noticed in Nigeria is the average Nigerian woman has this psychology of a dependency on a man. And I'm like, if I have a daughter, like, I'm like, hey, is this how society will somehow pass that message to her subconsciously? Like, she can't just do something for herself, because in this world we live in, it's brain work. It's no more strength, physical strength. I
definitely wouldn't place exclusively the blame or the onus on the woman for having ideas that she was socialized actively.
It's the social construct I'm blaming. I'm not blaming.
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, when you're nurtured and socialized into patriarchy, you know, it's sort of like talking about fish and water kind of thing, you know, or the air that you breathe. I mean, socialization has to do to sort of turn you out of that system because you're kind of swimming with the current. So, like, unless you're taught to actively, you know, recognize, number one, that you're drowning and you're getting caught up in something that's going to eventually kill you, and you're taught to actively swim against that current and try to get to, you know, somehow to safer shores, or, you know, if you will, it's really difficult to. And it's a survival thing as well. You know, how do you not be patriarchal in Nigeria and purport to survive? Or what are your possibilities for a reasonable existence in Nigeria if you don't bend to the will of patriarchy? You know, even if you have money, even if you have, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the last couple of days, you know, the whole thing about how men won't treat women so bad if women had more money or brought more money to the table, or this, you know, that's
what I bring to the table.
The latest thing that, you know, which is obscene. Number one, it's a lie, because I know for a fact that women are much more financially productive and independent than men in Nigeria. And a lot of households that supposedly have a male leader or whatever, women are maintaining those houses, but, you know, because of patriarchal image and stuff, and it's an embarrassment for a woman to be in a house where the man isn't the leader. Ego. You know, they're handing money over to men, they're carrying things and not showing that they're the ones who are doing it, you know, and they're women who outright own and do things and, you know, are entrepreneurs, that they don't get any more respect because of it. So, you know, being rich as a woman in Nigeria is not going to be your salvation from, you know, patriarchal abuse and violence. You know, being beautiful,
even being rich,
you know, young, exactly. Your money isn't legitimate. How did you get it? You know, so it's just it's very difficult, and it's something that it's quite painful to see, and to manage, you know, and I can't even imagine how it is to actually live it on the daily.
We'll get there step by step. That's if they're still in Nigeria.
Well, I think the internet to me has given me a lot of hope in Nigeria, and social media. Yeah. Because even the fact that we're on here, right, talking on your podcast, which is a podcast about atheism in Nigeria or Nigerians who are atheists. I mean, could this have existed, I don't know, 5-10 years ago?
Never.
It's just
Never.
So it's just, to me, the internet did this, right? The internet opened up the world for Nigerians. Yeah, definitely. It's just like it opened up the world for Nigerians in ways that travel didn't, because not every Nigerian has the capacity to leave. And get exposed, let's say, to different ways of living and doing and being. So the internet, even, of course, not every Nigerian has access to the internet or social media and stuff. Huge problem. But many more do. And they're able to see, regardless of how homophobic they are, they will see that gay people exist and don't have two heads. And, you can go to a different country where a woman will marry a woman, and you have a president of a country who's a man and who has a man as his husband. And, so it's just like, these are things that Nigerians can't pretend anymore. Doesn't exist, right? Like they can say, oh, well, it's just
Oyibo.
It has nothing to do with us, it's not really African or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But they will come to Obodo Oyibo, and they won't be as homophobic because they'll shut up real quick. They can only shout when they're Nigerian. They have like the arm of the state and the law to support them. But they come other place, they shut up real quick. So the internet has done a lot to show possibilities that people weren't aware of before, and also to open up avenues for us to have conversations and to see these realities, in ways that we never did before, which gives me hope that now we're talking about rape. Now we're talking about atheism. Now we're talking about homosexuality. Now we're talking about things that were completely taboo, not even just to imagine, but to publicly have discussions about, and it's happening on the internet more rapidly. And this is leading to the normalization of, these ideas and these realities. And which gives me hope. We definitely can make it.
We will. You will. One generation at a time. At least
for sure.
I know my own children will not carry any religion on their head.
Neither will mine.
The only name I will even use in the Bible is Thomas. Doubts every fucking idea.
Skeptic.
Thomas is a hero.
Question everything. Ask all kinds of questions.
Question everything. Nobody's above questioning.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another thing that I think Nigerians are more skeptical and more atheist and agnostic than we give them credit for. It's just that there's just a lot of liars and pretenders, so it's just, and you have to do that in order to survive,
I am not,
you see,
because my parents, both of them are pastors.
Yeah.
So I have to hide for now because they still have the leverage.
Of course.
Can you imagine?
So that's it. You have relatives that are completely abandon you. So you lose your social net, you lose your financial support, you lose community backing. And not only do you lose your support, you expose yourself to violence, like people who will come and target you and do harm against you because you're supposedly the devil or, or whatever.
Agent of the devil. Devil is
exactly.
You need
exactly. You see? So it's just, these are things that, we're still kind of working through, but our children will not deal with this. And that's the big gift that we'll give them is they will not have this burden. They'll just live a natural life, because a lot of people, when they find out that I'm an atheist or, I have a non-believer house and I'm not imposing any religion on my children, they ask me things like, well, why don't you just let them decide and, show them, expose them to this and that and let them choose, I'm like, no, nobody is born into religion. You're taught religion like anything else.
Let their own children choose.
Exactly. They don't let their kids choose. Like they give their kids the option to not believe, they actively told them what to believe. So I just, I'm actually doing what they're proposing, is that I just let them be. I don't enforce any kind of religious belief on them. And the human mind normally accepts reality as it is. So my kids were asking questions like they would get religious indoctrination at school or religious friends or teachers will talk to them. And then they'll come and they'll talk to me like, Mama, what's going on? Like, what is this? It doesn't make any sense to me. Because the natural, mind is not really trained, unless someone actually trains it to bend against its own eyes and its own perception of reality. So it doesn't, what literally it was. Oh my God, the funniest thing that happened was I remember I was at a wedding, and my darling sister, I love my sister, my oldest sister, and she's a super wonderful, loving human being, but she's also a huge believer. And I'm so sorry. I apologize. My computer is connected to my phone, and when my phone rings, let me put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Okay. So when so we were at a wedding, and my I think my sister was saying something about Jesus, and my son at the time, I think maybe he was like 6 or 7, I don't remember. Looked at me and he was really intrigued. He loves to talk to grown-ups and involve in conversation. Wow. He just asked me, he's like, "Oh, Mama, who's Jesus?" And what? And my sister could have died. I mean, her eyes were huge. What? She looked at me. She's like, "Uju?" Like, she couldn't even bring herself to say more. Like, all she could utter was Uju.
Like how?
Like how? Like, how is it possible that your child would open their mouth and ask, "Who is Jesus?"
That's a wonderful situation. Who is Jesus?
So I was just like, oh, my dear, Jesus is a prophet. And, those who are Christians are believers and followers of his teachings. And my son's like, "Oh, religion." I'm like, "Yes, it's a religious belief." My sister was like, she couldn't hear. And then my son, of course, he went out to play or to eat cake or whatever, but she just couldn't. She was like, "What? Your child doesn't know who Jesus is?"
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, we're all adults, and, I went over 20 years of me not being a believer and having rejected Christianity and religion. I've had to negotiate life and love and relationships with believers, so I have, warm, loving relationships with my, family and siblings and friends who are believers. Because we kind of stand on mutual support, and with others, it's sort of don't ask, don't tell type of policy, So I think with my siblings, it's more don't ask, don't tell. I have a brother who's a lot more actively evangelical, and every once in a while he'll ask me, "When will you accept Jesus as your personal savior?" And I'll say never, and we'll move on, But we go to events, family would call each other once in a while, and when someone dies, I hear from them. So, but it's just we have this sort of chill, Okay. It's just we will, but it was just an interesting moment to have, and I remember just being so excited and proud in my mind,
Yes, you have done a good job of inoculating him from the virus. Been fully vaccinated.
So, I mean, so they come with questions like that. They come, especially when believers abuse them in school, for example, and tell them awful things like they're going to go to hell. And, so they come to me and they ask me about these things. And, is it true that I'm going to die? And, and when we talk about it, and I, of course, I tell them that no, this is definitely not going to happen, and this is what people believe, and our household doesn't believe these things, and so it's children's minds are naturally just not involved in any of this unless you actively force them to.
That's why they always catch them young.
So that's it. And I have not forced, when it does come into our house, we talk about it and I explain to them, well, this is how I understand things to work. And we move on. And eventually the older they get, and the more sort of reason and logic and, understanding and critical thought that they develop, they can have these conversations with others and,
and they will do their own research based on what, when you don't tell them something, they will research and
they'll
see
look
that,
into it,
okay, what mom said.
Of course. And then they'll also figure out, how they feel about it. And because I've given them the tool to kind of work things out in their head.
Yeah.
Like my daughter right now, who's 9 years old, she's really into video games, these online games for children. Yeah. Roblox, for example, is a popular one. And they're evangelicals there on Roblox that, that go there and talk to them about God and Jesus and stuff like that. And she comes to me and she asked about it. And we talk about it. And another funny story, I signed her up for after school programs.
Okay.
And this was a public school. And public school in the United States, they don't teach religion. There's a separation of church and state, and you're not supposed to. So the after school program, I never imagined would have religious activities, because
they always try to sneak it in.
So there was a club called the Good News Club. And I think the way that they tried to sneak it in was it was an optional thing after school. So it wasn't part of the curriculum. So you weren't like forced to do it. Yeah. So, you had the choice if you wanted to do it. So it was called the Good News Club. And my life is so irreligious that when I looked at the name of the club, I'm like, Good News. I thought it was, it wasn't actually. I thought it was journalism or something. I'm like, Good News. Oh, maybe they're going to talk about the news and like updates. And it would be so cool to have my daughter involved in some journalism club at school. So I sent her to the Good News Club.
Oh no!
And we exist in our own little world, in our own little frames. That I'm so irreligious, and I have these assumptions of
trigger. What's the like, good news? Good news Bible,
right?
The good news trigger. You just know. That's a show.
I did not know. I swear to you, I sent my child to the Good News Club, and then she went to the Good News Club, and they tried to tell her the good news, and they told her, what did they tell her? That God created the world, and then she asked them who created God, and they kicked her out of the Good News Club.
Fantastic! That is fantastic. Wow! Who created God?
So that's, when she came home and she was talking about, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I thought you guys were going to be talking about news, literally, and journalism, and, and I thought that would be a fun club for you after school. And she's like, oh no, Mama, it was the Christians. They were telling us about the good news of Jesus Christ. It was really funny.
I don't know. The right wing.
I tell the story to say that my children are getting to the age where they can discern things, and have these conversations and kind of figure out things, and
They have been vaccinated. They've been vaccinated. They've gotten Pfizer and Moderna combined. Nothing can enter.
But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on over here. And I took this opportunity once again. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast.
Thank you for coming.
To just I am not an evangelical atheist in the sense that I'm not out there telling other people to be atheists or trying to convince people why I'm an atheist or argue with. I've been in this for like 20 going on 30 years now. Wow. So I've had those discussions, like, Facebook for a long time. I spent on Facebook having discussions about Facebook God and,
when I'm ready for Facebook, I'll go back there. I have to carry myself.
Yeah, I deleted Facebook like 3 years ago, but so I've gone through all of that. I've had long discussions with people. It no longer interests me to try to convince somebody or have opened myself up to be convinced somehow. I'm not
to defend your position.
Not at all. So, and I'm not really interested in having those conversations with the believers in my life either, because I have very close, best friends who are devout Christians.
Yeah.
And, I know Muslims, I know Jews, I know, Ifa people, so it's just like, I live very comfortably with theists, and they live comfortably with me, or at least they appear to live comfortably with me.
Yeah.
Whatever issues they have with me, they don't come to me with it.
Keep it to yourself.
And we don't have, exactly. We don't have those conversations. So I am not on your show looking to convince anybody to see the world my way, or to make any kind of argument for it. It's not my thing.
Yeah, to just tell Nigerian atheists that we did here.
We did. Like, and we're not going anywhere either, so that is what I'm here for, is to show that we exist, we thrive, we're successful, we're happy, and, we're not dying. Like, we are. So it's like, they try to convince the world somehow that if you live without God, that you're going to have this miserable, awful, cursed existence. And anybody who sees how I'm living, if you think I'm cursed, if you think my life is shit, number one, you're a liar. You don't. And number two, I bet a lot of people will want to live my awful life.
Oh, yes.
If living my life is awful, So I think that's why I'm here, is for representation.
Yeah.
And to say that it is possible to be a good, moral, kind, generous, honest person who loves other people and treats other people well, and who can live and exist and be happy, loving, successful in this world without God and religion. And you won't die.
Yes,
and I certainly am not.
Yes,
and that's it. That's my ministry, is, visibility.
Yeah. Well said. So, Dr. Uju, where can we find you online?
Twitter. Twitter. That's where I'm always. It's on my phone. It's also, I work a lot on the computer. So I write, I teach, so a lot of the work that I do is based on the computer. So there's a tab always open on Twitter.
Yeah.
There's a phone with Twitter. I jump in and out, while I'm working and teaching and doing other things, well, not while I'm teaching. When I'm in class, there's no Twitter, but when I'm in meetings, there's no Twitter, so they're definitely Twitter-free moments and hours even, and up to days in my life. But I definitely have a very strong presence on that platform.
Okay.
And it's where anyone can find me. Uju Anya is my my name together. I'm not scary. I'm not mean. Unless you're an asshole, unless you're a homophobe or a misogynist, I will dog walk you up and down. I will beat you publicly and humiliate and disgrace you and make you regret ever taking the decision to talk shit at me. But otherwise, I'm pretty sweet and delightful, and I love people and friends, and I welcome those who want to, chat and hang out and engage with me on Twitter, where I hang out the most.
Yeah, without a doubt, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So with this, I'd like to say thank you for honoring my invite.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This was a lovely conversation, and I appreciate it.
Time flew by. Time flew by before I bite my tongue. Wow, what an episode. Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to it again while editing. I enjoyed the conversation we had live. I hope you learned a lot from Auntie Uju. She gave us what it was like to deconvert back in the days. Crazy times. No internet. Chai. Anyway, please subscribe Apple Spotify, Google, and so on and so forth. If you'd like to be a guest, please feel free. Send a DM or send an email. All the ways you can reach out is in the show notes below. Then please join the free Thinkers Hangouts. There are a lot of free thinkers there on Clubhouse. There they create rooms, we have different discussions in order to build a community, to get rid of that loneliness that comes with being an atheist in an extremely religious country like Nigeria. So if you are not on Clubhouse, download the app, join. There's no more firewall. Android, iOS, anybody can join. Feel free to join. Let's ask discussions. You can even create rooms relevant to discussions that promote free thought. Have a nice week and see you next week. Take care.